Rev up your engines!
Trump says he's imposing tariff on all car imports from outside of the United States. Now, EV cars are extremely susceptible to this tax because many of them come from overseas. Audis, they come from Germany or Belgium. They also make them in Belgium. BMWs come from Germany. Cadillacs come from Warren, Michigan. But they can't sell them. Nobody's buying those electric Cadillacs or the electric GM pickup trucks. Nobody's buying them either. But the Chevy Blazer EV, it comes from Mexico. So that would be taxed too, right? Now, like I said, the Silverado electric truck does come from Michigan, but hardly anybody's buying it. They can't give those things away. I've seen ones that were listed at 85. They're going for 60, brand new. Nobody wants those things. They can't get rid of them. Now, the Faraday Future FF, it comes from Hartford, Connecticut. But have you ever seen one? I've never seen one, so that's not a big player, right? Now, the Ford F-150 Lightning also comes from Michigan, but then again, that's a massive failure, too. And the Ford Mach-E, which isn't that big of a deal either, it comes from Mexico, of course. They're all made in Mexico. Now, the G80 electric Genesis comes from South Korea. But the GV70 comes from Alabama. So, you got to do a lot of research if you're going to buy one of these things, right? Now, the GMC Sierra EV comes from Michigan. But the Honda Prologue, which is rebadged GM, is made in the same Mexican factory as the other GM's products are. But the Acura ZDX comes from Spring Hill, Tennessee, just down the street. The Hyundai electric cars, they come from Korea, South Korea, all of them. The Kias, they can come from South Korea. Most of them do so far, but they're starting to build them in West Point, Georgia, so some of those are made in the United States. They wouldn't be affected by the tariff. The Lexus electric car comes from Japan. The Lucid Air comes from the United States and Arizona, but I wouldn't buy one of those things. So does the Lucid Gravity. It also comes from Arizona. The Mercedes-Benz EQB actually comes from Hungary, but it's overseas, so it's taxed. Other Mercedes are made in Germany. But the Mercedes-Benz EQE SUV comes from Alabama, so that one wouldn't have a tax on it. Now, the Nissan Leafs, they're still made down the road here, but the Nissan Nania comes from Japan. So you ain't got to do a lot of research. You're going to buy a car now if they're going to tariff them. The Polestar 2 comes from China, so it would be taxed. But the Polestar 3 comes from South Carolina. The Subarus, their electric cars all come from Japan. And of course, the Teslas sold in the United States are made in California. Like I say, the ones we buy are from California. Now, the Toyota Z4X comes from Japan, but that's a massive failure. How they sold any of those? It's not even a player, really. And of course, those VinFast ones, they presently come from Vietnam, but they claim they're going to have a factory in the United States soon. They said that they're going to start U.S. production sometime in 2025 in North Carolina. And the Volvos come from Belgium, one of them. The Volvo EX90 comes from South Carolina. So, you really got to do a lot of research if you want to find where these electric cars come from. But you can see a whole bunch of them for overseas, and the tariff would really hit them hard because they're expensive enough to begin with. Well, for those of you who are really into Hemi V8s, it looks like they're starting to ramp up production again of the V8s. They were saying they weren't going to make them anymore, and here's something that I like. They had been making those Hemi V8s in Mexico, and now they say they're going to make them in Michigan. Hurrah! Hurrah! Hey, maybe Trump's doing some good here. They had so many problems with those Hemi engines they made in Mexico. Them cams going, cranking, rattling away, burning oil, right? Bring it back to Michigan where they made them correctly in the first place. They're going to make them in the Dundee engine plant in Michigan, and they say starting in August. And they say it's going to be all of them, the 5.7 liter and the bigger ones, too. So it looks like old Stellantis has changed its mind about not making the Hemis anymore. Probably because they're finding no one wants to buy their electrified cars. If you look at the sales of the crappy electric cars that Stellantis makes, it's a good thing they're going back to regular engines. The company may end up going bankrupt. They're crap to begin with. People don't want them anyways. But they're not even good. Well, you better watch out what bridges you drive over here in the United States, because the NTSB just released a report of 68 U.S. bridges that are at the risk of collapse. Now, they started to do this study because of that Baltimore one where the boat hit the bridge and it all collapsed. And it turns out that we taxpayers are going to have the brunt of paying for the stupid thing, that the insurance is only paying a small pittance of it. They wheedled their way out of it as usual. So you might want to look it up on this NTSB report and check out the list of bridges and see if one of these 68 bridges is in your area, and you might try to avoid it whenever possible, or perhaps when you get on it, go over it as fast as you can to get to the other side before it collapses. Now, you might think, well, there's got to be more bridges than that, right? Well, these are bridges where there's a lot of sea traffic going through, and they said boats might hit them and they could fall down. There's a lot more bridges in this country that have problems, right? They're just going by these big giant ones that have a lot of ships traveling under them. Sure, there's a lot more than 68 worn out bridges in this country, but these are the big ones, so you might check the list out and try to avoid these bridges if you can, especially when it's high tide. The boats have an easier chance of whacking into the bridges. Interesting enough, Hyundai is now doubling down on their U.S. production with a new electric vehicle plant. Maybe they're listening to Trump, I don't know. There's a Hyundai factory in Savannah, Georgia that they expanded and have full-time operation now. They had a ceremony to talk about their full-time operation. It currently has a capacity of 300,000 cars a year. When this $54 billion facility becomes fully operational, they'll be able to make 500,000 cars a year. Now, it isn't just EVs, because if it's just EVs, Hyundai may be losing their shirts. Who's going to buy these things, right? They also make hybrid cars there, and those are the hot sellers. So maybe some of the stuff is working. If they'd be building a bunch of these hybrids in the United States and Georgia, giving American jobs, building hybrid cars. Just, I'm warning Hyundai, don't make a mistake. Don't build 500,000 electric cars a year. No one's going to buy the things. And they're not dumb business people, so I'm assuming most of these 500,000 when the factory's done will probably be hybrid cars, not battery EV cars. Well, now they're recalling robo-taxis. Zoox is announcing a voluntary recall of more than 200 of their self-driving Zoox vehicles because, I guess, a couple of people got wiped out on motorcycles. These Zoox things were just stopping randomly, slamming the brakes on in the middle of nowhere, and these guys' motorcycles plowed right into them. They didn't expect them to just stop. Now, the motorcycle collisions prompted an investigation by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and now they're voluntarily recalling them because, guess what? The software doesn't work right. Now, Zoox is now saying, and I quote, "The recalled software is no longer in service." So, as per usual, these self-driving vehicles, they're not ready for prime time. Now, Zoox started testing last November in San Francisco with their self-driving car. And, of course, now, almost half of the ones they got out there done over because, guess what? The software isn't right. This is going to be the future. The future, all problems are going to be software problems, right? And software often isn't written right in the first place. So, hey. Here we go. Self-driving cars with bad software. Oh, who could have forecast that one, right? Well, here's a weird one. Ford Motor Company has patented a manual gear shifter for EVs. And you might think, wow, I can shift my EV with it. The only thing is it's entirely fake. There are no gears in it. It is mimicking shifting gears. Just like a while back, the CVT transmissions, a lot of people don't like because it just, they don't shift, right? Have fake shift points in them where you can have a paddle shifter and make it look like you're shifting gears. There's no gears to actually shift. And this is the same thing. It's mimicking it because they think, oh, people want a gear shift. Now, I don't know why Ford is doing this. Because numero uno, 96% of Americans drive automatics. Why would you make something like this for 4% of the market, and it's for electric vehicles only, so that's a small percentage of the market. It would be such a small amount of people. Why would Ford ever do this? Now, this is a patent. They haven't actually built the thing. I read the article, and I thought, oh, they'd be kind of interested. You could have an electric vehicle with multi-speeds, which would be a big advantage because electric motors are efficient at lower RPMs. At higher RPMs, they're inefficient. They use more electricity. Get anybody who's got an electric car, and I'll tell you, if they drive really fast, Power goes down the toilet. So when you're going fast, that electric motor, or if it's got more than one motor, the motors have to spin faster and faster RPMs, and they're less efficient. If they had a gear like 5 speeds, then you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and in 5th gear, the motor would not have to spin as fast to drive the wheels, right? But then you'd have to redesign them. They'd have to have actual single motor in the middle and a transmission, and it costed way more. It cost more, yada, yada. But anybody who's ever driven electric cars, I had a Tesla once. I was road testing, and I drove it super fast for 1/4 of a mile, 1/4 of a mile on the road. And it wasn't like I was going 100 miles an hour. I was only doing like 75. It lost 4 miles of range on the range thing going that 1/4 of a mile. So you're losing a lot of power when you do a lot of fast acceleration and fast driving electric motors. And I thought, hey, great, they'll put a multi-speed transmission. But no, it's just a fake one. So, and we don't even know if Ford's going to build these things. I thought, oh, great, they're going to have, no, it's just another one of these scams where it's the fake shifting. It's not actually shifting, but you can pull it up and down. And they even have a patent for you feel a resistance like in a regular shift, just like if you don't realize that almost every single car you're driving today has an electronic computer throttle. There's no connection between that gas pedal and your engine. There isn't a cable that opens the throttle. It's all done electronically. But the engineers have made them so that they got enough resistance that it feels like it's working right. Just like many cars today have electronic power steering. It still feels like regular power steering because the engineers made it so it feels like the old style one did. Because if it was totally smooth and there was no resistance, guess what? You'd be feeling weird. You'd be going all over the place because it would be too loose. So they can do a lot of stuff electronically. There's no arguing that. But electronic fake shifting and electric battery cars, I think it's just a stupid idea. Well, here's some interesting tech news. Saudi Arabia, giant Aramco, has a pilot program that they say can remove 12 tons of carbon dioxide per year from the atmosphere. You know, because, of course, you burn gasoline, gives off carbon dioxide. They're trying to figure out, okay, well, if the cars burn it off, let's find something to take it back out and use it, right? So they're working on those things. But it does 12 tons a year. Globally, humans emit 37.4 billion tons of carbon dioxide a year. Okay, and this one takes 12 tons a year, while we're throwing out 37 billion tons. Okay, that's nothing. That's meaningless. It doesn't mean anything. And yeah, it's a pilot program, but people are going to find that stuff would be so expensive because, you know, carbon dioxide's in the air we breathe, right? And to suck it out, it's going to take a tremendous amount of energy, a tremendous amount to get 37 billion tons out. I don't think it's happening anytime soon. It would be better to limit it than to try to take it out once it's there. Like they say, when the cat's out of the bag, it's really hard to put the cat back into the bag. And in this case, taking the carbon dioxide out, the massive amount that we throw in, having these little machines that take a little dink here, a little dink here, and use, of course, a lot of energy, how this takes it out of the air. No one's saying, is it electrical? Well, the electricity has to be generated, and then that creates carbon dioxide. So, I don't know. It sounds kind of like a cat chasing its tail here. You know, it's not really getting anywhere. Here's one we certainly expect. Turns out that millions of tires being sent from Britain to India for recycling are instead being cooked in makeshift furnaces, causing serious health problems and huge environmental damage in India. No surprise, right? They got cheap labor there, and all of the Western world tries to sell their crap over there. If you've ever seen those YouTube videos about how they recycle the giant ships, right? Well, they do it with tires, too. Britain actually has a rule that, they got to make sure that these waste tires are treated correctly, Yeah, in Britain, right? So they don't treat them in Britain. They have too many rules. So instead, they send them to India, where they start burning them up in these giant furnaces and creating a mess. There are processes that work fine, but they're very expensive. I knew a guy that did it in Conroe, Texas, years ago. They used liquid nitrogen, and they'd freeze the tires. Then a giant machine would stomp them, and then they'd shatter. And then they have magnets, and the magnets would pick the steel particles, right? And then the rest would be recycled. But that's a very expensive process. The liquid nitrogen costs money. The machines cost a lot of money, right? It's a very expensive thing to do. They don't do that in India. They just burn them in a furnace, right? Melt them. When people tell you that things are being recycled, hey, try to follow it down the line, and you find out they're not recycling much of anything. And hiding it to other countries, it doesn't cut the mustard anymore. We're all figuring it out, people. They could do it in England, but it would cost so much money to meet all their regulations. Like here in the United States, they just ship them to India. And no surprise, they find out that it's polluting people there. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.